Hello, friends. Schools are communities full of energy, ideas, and commitment. Yet one of the biggest challenges is coherence. Teachers come from different backgrounds with different training, different experience, and very different perspectives. And leaders, too, bring varied experiences of what good leadership should look like. And boards, of course, are always there trying to balance the competing pressures and expectations. We know that strong cultures depend on shared touchpoints, but in practice, creating a common language across classrooms and teams is difficult. Take learning, for example. Many teachers use very different approaches, often with very different assumptions behind them. Without a shared framework, it's easy for conversations about teaching and learning to drift or to stall. What if there was a way to bring clarity to that dialogue? A simple framework that gives teachers a common language, a common structure, and makes different approaches to learning visible so that colleagues can intentionally transition from one approach to another. A consistent structure to support and stretch and challenge children. That's what the Learning Deck provides. But clarity about principles is only the start. Once you can see the map of learning, the next challenge is expanding your practice. What does it actually look like in the classroom? What strategies could you use to bring those principles to life? Wouldn't it help to have concrete routines, questioning approaches, or feedback techniques to expand on your repertoire, something that you could pick up for planning or use in a coaching session? I think it was Einstein that said, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is insanity. And when teachers get stuck in one approach, it can be hard to see alternatives that may be more impactful. That's the role of the Praxis Deck, concrete strategies for each profile, providing clarity on what alternative approaches might look like. And of course, teaching is never isolated from leadership. Schools depend on leaders at every level to guide people, to hold focus, and to create alignment. But leadership is often invisible, lived in approaches that people can sense but rarely put a name on. So what if there was a way to make those approaches visible, to give leaders a map of impact so that they can see themselves more clearly and to help align the team? Imagine the same language and structure that clarified learning could also clarify leadership. That's where the Lead Deck fits in. And while profiles help leaders to understand themselves, leadership is also played out in the conversations, especially the hard ones. Every leader has faced moments where the stakes are high and emotions are strong, and finding the right words is a little bit difficult. So what if instead of entering those moments with uncertainty, you had a structure that gave you clarity without locking you into a script? A framework for guiding more productive outcomes and the language tools to help get you there. That's the purpose of the Frame Deck. And leaders face decisions of all sizes all the time. Most of them have complexity built in. Balancing what staff want with what parents want, with what the budget allows, and also doing what's right. Urgent demands pile up, but schools can't afford to sacrifice the long-term vision. So leaders often ask, how do we pause to zoom out and see the bigger picture? That's the role of the Plans Deck, a framework to sharpen thinking so that decisions are reflective, coherent, and sustainable. Cards that support personal reflection or team-based discussion, using a common language to build alignment. But leadership is never solo. Teams are where culture is lived, and yet too often conversations hover at the surface. What if teams had prompts and strategies that encourage deeper dialogue, build trust, and foster real collaboration? How much faster could new team leaders grow if they had practical tools to navigate team dynamics and concise strategies to handle the nuances of leading colleagues? The Team Deck was created to accelerate that process, helping leaders become more impactful in less time. But even with good leadership and strong teams, schools still struggle with hidden patterns, stress, misalignment, mistrust. And these forces quietly shape culture long before they appear as outcomes. What if there was a way to make those dynamics visible, to be able to shift conversations from blame to patterns, from frustration to growth? Now, culture conversations can be notoriously difficult, and they often become personal or adversarial. So what if you could visualize culture differently as patterns that could be understood and addressed and improved? The Dynamics Deck equips HR people and senior leaders to do just that, to pinpoint problems in terms of patterns, to reduce personal conflict and replace it with strategies for growth. And above all of this sits governance, the complex, often unseen task of oversight, strategy, and vision. Governance can feel abstract or confusing, especially for those new to the role. And board members are busy professionals. They don't have time to wade through hefty books or manuals on governance and theory. What if instead they had a framework that distilled governance into clear roles, illustrated their impact, and provided practical tools for dialogue and reflection? The board deck makes governance coherent and accessible, and with curated scenarios to spark discussion, without needing a board trainer in the room. Each deck answers a real challenge. Each deck is concise, visual, and tactile, making complex ideas easier to see, share, and act on. Each deck stands alone, but together they form a coherent system, a way to align vision with practice, culture with systems, leadership with learning. Because schools are complex, but they don't have to be complicated. The Synnovate Suite makes the invisible visible, so people at every level of the school can move forward together. Tools for thinking, systems for leading, across classrooms, teams, and schools.